we're back on the air with the Restaurant Brokers. This is Eric and Robin Gagnon, and we sell restaurants. Remember, you can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com. Take a moment and like us on Facebook. Our Facebook handle is We Sell Restaurants, and our Twitter handle is Sell Restaurants. We Sell Restaurants is your industry authority and source for information. We are the Restaurant Brokers, and we have been talking about the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Show. And some of you might just be wondering, how do I stay up to date on trends if I don't have the time? Well, first of all, join us here. We will keep you up to date because we spend a long time with Matthew Mandelport. Matthew is the managing consultant for Technomic Inc., a leading fact-based consulting and research firm serving the food industry. Matthew describes himself as highly imaginative, resourceful, energetic, out-of-the-box thinking culinary professional who plays well with others. Matthew is also a team leader with exceptional business acumen, communication skills, analytic abilities, and an engaging speaking presence that we can attest to. He leverages a diverse background in law, business, technology, and food service to find opportunities and challenges. He is also the author of the food service-focused blog, The Epicurean Candidate. We caught up with Matthew at the at the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Show, and here's our interview.
There's some incredible insights today on the restaurant business, and really I think took people down into a level that they don't think about, just esoterically, as they're just beginning to think about the business. So tell us again your name and who you're with and a little bit about what you talked about today.
Sure. My name is Matthew Mandelport. I'm a managing consultant with Technomic. We are food service research and consultancy out of Chicago. We've been doing that for 40 plus years. And we talked about today is a program that I developed called Insights Beyond Trends. The idea being that to go beyond simply recommending put this on your menu and all things will be great, to provide a sense of how people can re-examine their own menus and their own operations and incorporate kind of the underlying fundamentals that drive those trends into their own and make them relevant for themselves.
Well, you said so many interesting things. I was caught up by all of it, but I was intrigued about food trucks. Now, what did you share with the audience today about food trucks?
Well, food trucks have caught the fancy of not only the networks, but the industry itself. But when it comes down to it, they still remain a very small aspect or niche within the market itself, if you will, barely moving the needle from our perspective. They're great laboratories for culinary creativity, and they represent a departure from traditional dining norms and the dynamic, but they still represent, for the most part, the exception rather than the rule in terms of how people regard dining. We saw that, in terms of what drives them there, 40% they just happen to come on by. When you think about perhaps other restaurants, the number of people that make reservations or make it a destination spot, it's a much different dynamic, a much different metric. And the other thing too is that even though things like food safety and cleanliness are table stakes for bricks and mortar restaurants, the fact that 75% of individuals make food safety and cleanliness their number one priority or number one decision driver at a food truck shows how far the American public has to go in terms of accepting them as the food standards or safety standards as being kind of de facto okay.
Great. Now tell us a little bit about that customer who's the quick casual customer and actually the market share that's being developed in that stream of revenue. Where are they coming from? Where are the customers coming from?
Well, when you look back in the old days, the QSR customer, for example, tended to be the 18 to 24-year-old male kind of thing. I mean, that was the quintessential Burger King customer. Then we go on the other side of the chasm, and we look at casual dining, and that typically tended, when you talk about guys like Applebee's and Fry, that tended to be more middle American families and couples and things like that. But we've seen both those groups, those demographics, become obviously on the Applebee's kind of side of the casual dining kind of thing. Those customers get older. And on the QSR side, we've seen that there's been demand for, we see the role of women increasing. I always think it's kind of amusing when we slice and dice all these demographics in terms of age and ethnicity and income. It's kind of like women are 51% of the population. You might want to pay attention to this big chunk over here. But we see now the rise of Gen X, millennials, and folks like that. And we see the rise of demographic groups like Asians and Hispanics, where suddenly what was accepted as the norm, that is the QSR norm, the CDR norm, is no longer accepted in the sense that we want to know where our food came from. We want better quality food. We don't mind paying more for it so long as there's a justification for it. In the case of, say, I use Chipotle as the kind of the benchmark, where it's like, well, it's safer, it's organic, it's whatever the case might be. It matches more with our lifestyle. I'm not simply viewing food as fuel. I'm viewing it as an extension of who I am and the values that it represents to me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I want to give you my card.
Oh, by all means, yeah.
I'd love to get your...
Matthew's presentation was built as a fast-paced overview of the latest industry trends that was sure to provide plenty of food for thought. He did a virtual state of the industry and a consumer update followed by a look at leading menu and marketing trends that operators could adapt to fuel their own success.
There were a lot of numbers in his presentation. He made them so fun, though. For example, Eric, did you know that independents outperformed chains in 2012? In total, the industry was up 4%, but the independents, those of you out there with just those units in your own imagination and skill, were up by 5.2%. And I'll tell you, some of the data points were really hit home with me because one of the first things he said is that when you look at what the most important aspects of the business are to customers, food quality, cleanliness, and service are the most important aspects. Pricing is fourth on the list, and so many times as restaurant brokers, we run into the fellow who's so concerned that the guy down the street might be 10% cheaper. So what Matthew's research would tell you is take that energy and put it into getting food quality, cleanliness, and your service to the best possible standard. And quickly, tell us a little bit about craveability, Eric, in just a few seconds.
Matthew mentioned craveability several times, and this is something that's very kind of interesting because, like you said, we don't really know how to define it. When you see it, you know what it is. So basically, what he's saying is that you have to create craveability for your restaurants. It's not only good enough that people come and have a good experience, they're happy. The better question to ask your consumers is, when are you going to be back? And that's the craveability factor that he really wants to drive in, that's going to drive more success to your restaurant model.
Well, that's a great overview of craveability, and we want to take a moment and thank today's Restaurant and Food Service Industry newspaper, one of our sponsors, for allowing us to spend some time on this subject and many others as the Restaurant Brokers hit the radio show every single week. Continue to listen. In our next segment, we're going to bring you Restaurant Reality. That's where we'll give you the full and unbridled truth about the restaurant industry. This is Eric and Robin Gagnon. We are the Restaurant Brokers.